thought people were on WB's ass for the Snyderverse? Let them not make a sequel to this. So Dune tells the story of House Atreides as they are thrust into a violent war for the desert planet Arrakis. Well, it's finally here, everybody. This is the movie that I have seen probably most people online say is their most anticipated film of the year. There has been a hype train like no other for this thing ever since it was announced, ever since they announced the cast, ever since they showed the first trailer, ever since the first reactions came out of the film festivals. There have been a lot of people dying to see Dune. And I have not been one of them. I'm somebody that, Denis Villeneuve, I think, is an incredible director. His movies always, I would always say, are very good movies, but they're never really movies that I love. They're never movies that I have the desire to go back to. I like them, I go on, and then I never think about them again. So it's just not really on my wavelength for whatever reason. And Dune did not help that, because Dune is a property I have no knowledge of. I've never read the book, never watched any of the previous iterations, like the 80s David Lynch one's probably the most famous one. Never seen even one scene of that movie. And even leading up to the release of this film, even watching the trailer, I still didn't have the best idea of what exactly Dune was. It looked sci-fi, it looked fantasy, it looked beautiful, but beyond that, what story are you going to tell me? So I walked into this movie with as close to no expectations as you could have. Knowing my history with Villeneuve, I did not expect to walk out loving this. Knowing my history with sci-fi fantasy, Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, things like that, that I'm not really a huge fan of and haven't even really seen all those movies yet. This was on paper a movie that was not for me at all. So color me shocked when I walked out of this nearly 3-hour film and said, you know what? That was pretty fucking good. So getting into the positives of Denis Villeneuve's Dune, first and foremost, like I already said, Denis Villeneuve is a masterful filmmaker. The guy is just, he's one of the best. He is a name that whenever you see his name on the poster, whenever he is announced to a property, you know immediately that's going to be an amazing looking film, if nothing else. But he just knows how to get the best performances out of his actors. He knows how to get the best cinematographer around to do all of the work on every single visual on the film. I mean, any of his movies for the most part, especially the last couple, you could freeze frame just about any moment in the film and it looks like an art piece. Even gets the best score around. I mean, you got Hans Zimmer in here booming through the speakers all throughout this film. And this guy is just a masterful guy to get all of the best people he possibly can in to make the best possible movie. And even though I'm not somebody that likes repeat viewings of his work, I think we can all agree he pretty much nails it every single time. And in surrounding himself with one of the best casts that I've seen in a couple of years, it goes without saying that pretty much everybody across the board gives awesome performances. I mean, there's some that stand out more than others, which is why I say pretty much, but there's not a single person here that is not delivering on the top of their talent level. I mean, from somebody that's kind of new for me, Timothée Chalamet, all the way down to people like Aquaman himself. I mean, you got Rebecca Ferguson here, who I'm starting to really, really love this woman. I mean, I liked her in Mission Impossible, I loved her in Dr. Sleep, and she is the absolute standout, both her character and her performance in this movie, and she's the character that I really want to see more of if we get a part 2. And even smaller roles here, like Javier Bardem, and then you got Josh Brolin. I mean, even Oscar Isaacs is great. Not that I should be surprised. His movie choice isn't the best, I'll say that, but whenever he shows up to play. And everybody in this movie is Oscar caliber. And one of the biggest things for me that was the surprise here was that the world building, the lore that they are getting into, and there is a lot of it in this one half of a movie, I was able to keep up with it. This is a type of thing where it's not really my forte. I'm not really big into fantasy, and I certainly love some sci-fi, but there's a limit to how much I can take. And I was walking into this expecting there to be just 1,000 rules, a bunch of different languages and worlds and species, almost like walking into Star Wars again for the first time. And it very much is like that, but they do a good job at having it be very rich and very palatable on screen, but at the same time, it's accessible. I'm somebody that this is not easy for me to walk into, and it was easy within 30 minutes or so to get along with the story and the world that they were telling me, and start to understand where everybody and everything fits in this world. And I also liked how accessible the story itself was. I mean, there's a lot of intricacies here. There's a lot of, different factions and different houses and politics and everything that we don't even really fully understand by the end of this film, but all of that is just kind of like seasoning on top of the base story, which is there's this resource spice on this planet that the entire galaxy it holds in high regard. It's the most valuable resource in the entire galaxy, and everybody is fighting over it, and it's about kind of the political climate of who is going to manufacture and manage this planet. And that as a base storyline is very easy to get into and very easy to understand where all of this conflict starts to come from throughout the film. And they really did a good job at balancing all of the different types of scenes they're going for. I mean, you have these slower, more methodical, philosophical, and even to a certain degree faith-based scenes where people are discussing their origins and discussing, kind of the way of the world. And then you have big, huge spectacle action sequences where there's bombs dropping and there's knives throwing back and forth. There's even like more tense scenes where little tiny drones go into a room and you're not quite sure what the hell that is until it's too late. There's even scenes that are pretty tension-filled and almost on a horror film level regarding the main antagonist of this movie, which is led by the great Dave Bautista. And then you get Stellan Skarsgård as kind of like the emperor, if you will, of this movie, the Star Wars emperor, not the literal emperor. There's another emperor we haven't met yet, but kind of the main intimidating villain. This guy is just menacing all the way, like from his physical appearance to the way that he floats up and looks like he's 8 feet tall because his, dress, or whatever the fuck you want to call it, his robe just goes infinite all the way to the floor, and just how ruthless he is in every situation, to where anything that comes up, he's just going to give the biggest I don't give a fuck, kill this person response. And just by knowing that that guy is the head of the snake, that guy is the top of this entire house, makes them that much more intimidating. And the movie does a good job at cycling through all of that for 3 hours, to where you never really feel bored. You never feel like there's this lull, or there was a great action sequence an hour ago, but I'm starting to get a little pissed and I'm starting to, move around in my seat a little too much. No, they do a good job at mixing things up to keep you intrigued all the way throughout. Moving on to the mixed, the things that I'm going to say here, and even really in my negatives, it's hard to say whether or not they're going to stay that way, because this is very much half of a movie. Most of us movie fans already knew that walking into it. I certainly did, and it's good to be prepared for that. But this is very much like a 5-hour movie that has been chopped in half, and you only get half of it right now. And so, talking about some of the things that I mixed on, one of the main ones is the main character of Paul, played by Timothée Chalamet. And I think that there's interesting aspects to his character, and like I said, the performance is awesome, and I'm intrigued by him as a lead, but he's very much put in the place of this messiah role. There's this myth, there's this legend of somebody that is going to rise up and give everybody peace. It's very similar to a lot of movies that we have seen since Dune, which, it needs to be said, Dune probably influenced all of those movies, but you have this character that it has this legacy that he is being told that he has, to where you're going to rise up, you're going to be this godlike figure, you're going to save us all. And he's very kind of subdued, emotional about it all. Like, he's a very stoic character for most of the movie. He gets excited here and there. He certainly shows his emotion whenever the scenes need him to, but for the most part, this is a kid that is given this legacy that we don't really know why, we don't really know if he's going to measure up to it, and there's not really any reason on screen what we're seeing for us to really dive into this character and put all of our faith and our interest in him, aside from other characters telling us that we should. And so by the end of these, 2 movies, I might change my tune on that. He might be this awesome character that had this great arc that was slow through the first half, and then he really rises to be the star of the show in the second half. But as a individual movie, as a solitary movie-going experience, I don't think that he was the most interesting character in the movie by a long shot. And the other mixed aspect is that, again, I need to see the second half before I can say this definitively. There is so much to unpack in this movie, with lore, with characters, with world building, with establishing what these houses are, and kind of giving us the history of this world and catching us all up to speed, and even exploring some of the things that they kind of touch on throughout the movie, but don't really spend a whole lot of time marinating in, like the politics and the intricacies of the worldviews of all of these different houses, or even really establishing who the hell the Emperor is, why he's the Emperor, and who the fuck cares what that guy says. All of those little things, they kind of have to get through because there is so much to get through in this movie, to the point where even Denis Villeneuve splitting it into two, it's going to be a 5-hour movie. And by the end of it, I have to say, it almost feels like it should be 3 movies. Now again, I need to see the second half, but there's a point in this film where it felt like a natural way to close out a first act of this story. And then the movie carried on for another 45 minutes and ended in kind of an awkward spot in the story. And I'm seeing kind of where they're going. Again, I don't have the knowledge of the book or the other movies, so I don't know specifically how things are going to wrap up, but it feels like they could have taken that 45-minute story of Act 2 out and fleshed out things that they were bringing up in that first act a little bit more, and the movie might have felt like a little bit more of a fleshed out experience, a little bit of a richer experience, story and lore-wise. And I know it's a tall order to expect 3 Dune films, because those of us that like this movie are going to be on pins and needles until they announce the second movie, which might not even happen. But as a plan for WB, if they invested enough money and enough confidence in Denis Villeneuve to do these movies how he wanted, I feel like they should have done 3, or they should have done some kind of a limited series on HBO Max or something. This is a very cinematic movie. You should absolutely see it on the screen, but I can't help but feel like even though we're stretching this, what was once a 1 movie, into 2 very long movies, it still kind of feels like we're skating over things. Now, I saw quite a few early responses that said that this movie just ends suddenly and it ends in a really unsatisfying spot. And I gotta be honest, I don't completely agree with that. Normally I would be the first person saying that, because I hate when movies just end abruptly in a weird spot to seem artistic. And I fully expected this movie to do that. But I feel like the way that it ends, the spot in the story that it ends, it is wrapped up good enough for 1 movie to where this can stand on its own. But it totally hinges on the fact that we get a second film and then they follow that story through. But what I will say on the mixed side of that is that it does feel like it's very awkwardly paced for the last 45 minutes, because like I already said, as far as making this 3 films, there's a point in this movie about 2 hours in where it feels like it's coming to a close. When you know you're only getting half the story, it's like, okay, this is probably a good spot to stop until the next one. But it carries on for another 45 minutes, to the point where, have you ever been binging a show late at night and you know you're too fucking tired, but you're just so into the show that you click next episode and then you just end up falling asleep about 20 minutes into it? That's kind of how the movie feels, to where you've already started setting up another act of story and then you just stop it. It's not an awkward stop. It's not a sudden, really genuinely out of nowhere cut to black or cut to credits. But it does feel awkward that we're starting to bring up new story elements just as we're getting ready to walk out the theater. And now moving on to the negatives. One, for me, I don't know if it's going to be just my individual theater experience. Sometimes this happens. Every theater is different. There were multiple times throughout the movie where Hans Zimmer's score was booming and was, definitely getting ranked up for the scene that was going on. And all the while, the characters that are talking are whispering. And they're kind of giving like this really stern whisper. And there were so many moments, namely between Timothée Chalamet and Rebecca Ferguson, that while that score was going, I couldn't hear what the fuck they were saying. And there's multiple times throughout the movie where that happened. So I don't know if that's a sound mixing issue with the actual movie, which is kind of hard to believe with the mastery that's going on behind the camera. But I definitely had at least 4 or 5 dialogue exchanges between characters that I needed subtitles. Again, hate to beat a dead horse. I won't know this fully until I see the second half, but I will also say this movie is not going to be a very rewatchable movie for me. This is definitely an experience that I would really have to be in a specific mood for, or be doing some kind of a binge or some kind of a coverage on Dune to really sit back through. As much as I really enjoyed my experience with this movie, it's not the type of movie that I would immediately go home and pop on HBO Max or bring friends over and watch it with them. It's not that type of movie for me, and rewatchability plays a lot into scores that I give films, because the legacy of how much I love a movie is a very big, important piece of my movie fandom. So Dune, enjoyed the hell out of it. I don't know how long it'll be before I watch it again. And my final negative, which honestly is not anything against this movie specifically, just against my movie experience as a whole. It baffles me that they have not already put part 2 into production. It seems incompetent after I've seen the movie. I mean, I understand that with Blade Runner 2049, Denis Villeneuve has shown that his movies aren't necessarily as widespread appeal as you might hope that they would be. And I honestly, before I saw the movie, walked in expecting this movie to have a very similar response to Blade Runner, to where people that saw it loved it, cinephiles loved it, critics loved it, but it just didn't really have any appeal to the general population, and the box office was going to reflect that. And I genuinely hope that's not the case. I hope that I eat my words. But the fact that WB put so much money, first of all, but money and confidence and time into giving Denis Villeneuve this franchise, letting him split it into 2 movies, knowing all throughout the production that this movie hinges entirely on being able to follow up the story with a second film, and us as fans that walk out after this and like it, have no idea if we're ever going to get that. That is a really shitty feeling. I mean, it's like going on a blind date with a girl. You show up, she's gorgeous, she has some of the most amazing things to say, the conversation is rich and interesting all throughout the date, and then you get ready to walk out and she says, you know, I gotta be honest, I don't really know if I'm ready for a relationship, but I'll call you if I do. It's not a good feeling. It's not a good feeling to walk out and be like, well, fuck, now what? I mean, it might be 3 years before we see this movie. It might be never. And that would be a huge cinematic crime. Like, I understand this movie is not going to be for everybody. I was fully in belief it was not going to be for me. But now that I've seen it, now that I'm invested, and now that you just chop it off halfway through Act 2, I'm just left wondering, is WB going to be jackasses? Is this going to be one of those movies that we talk about for decades and go, yep, they fucked us hard on that one? I hope not. Overall, guys, I think that this is one of the most interesting sci-fi fantasy movies that I have seen in a extremely long time, maybe in decades. It's not really a genre I pop in and out of very often, so take that with a grain of salt, but I was extremely impressed with this movie. I was extremely surprised. This is not my favorite film of the year, but damn if it's not the most surprising movie of the year. I thought that it was masterfully made. I thought that it was an exciting, really interesting experience. Everybody's at the top of their game here, but damn, I'm worried if we're gonna get that part 2. So if you're a fan of sci-fi fantasy, if you were a Dune fan, absolutely check this thing out on the biggest screen possible. Do not watch it at home and deprive yourself of this experience. And if you're somebody that's on the fence like me, I would still say to give it a chance, because it's a movie that definitely deserves the box office money, and it deserves to hopefully surprise you, if not at least give you an interesting experience. So check this thing out, and when it comes out on video, go out and buy it. So what do you guys think of Dune? Have you been really anticipating this movie, or were you like me and just had no interest whatsoever? And what did you ultimately think of it? And did you watch it in the theaters or at home on HBO Max? Let me know that too, because I think that might shift the scale a little bit on how impressed you were with this. But let me know, guys. Please like and share this video. Hit that subscribe button if you're finding me for the first time. There is a ton of other movie content on this channel. Of course, it's October. We're thick in Halloween season. I've got a ton of Halloween Kills content. I still got another video coming up this weekend. And then we're going to get into The Crow and then lead up to 31 on 31, which is a big ranking video that we do on this channel annually. So definitely do not miss out on that. Hit that subscribe button. If you guys enjoyed this video to the point that you want to help support this channel and help financially back this channel and help keep the lights on, please check out the link to my Patreon page down below. There's lots of exclusive perks and exclusive content on there for that contribution, and I appreciate your consideration for that. Thank you for watching as always, and remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean that you have to be.